And we're live, the magic of technology.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us for our conversation today. My name is Kelly Paris. I'm the Director of Events at Digital District. We have a really exceptional panel for you guys today. We're going to be talking everything legal and ethics in the digital space. And I think this is a really important conversation for us to have because I'm pretty sure we're all guilty of mindlessly clicking agree to every single iTunes update without having any idea what we're actually agreeing to. And as the digital space changes, these issues are going to become more and more important. A couple of housekeeping things really quickly. If you want to follow along with the conversation on Twitter or submit questions, please use the hashtag DDEthics. You can also submit questions on our website via our content form, and that is thedigitaldistrict.org. I want to introduce Jason Nellis, who's going to be our moderator for today. Jason is the founder of Overachiever Media based out of DC and has an extensive background in content creation, so I'm sure he'll have some words of wisdom to contribute as well. Over to you, Jason.
I think that's entirely false, but I appreciate the lie. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our chat today. We've got a phenomenal panel. Just a quick FYI. We have two of our panelists available. We're trying to get the third invited. Had a little bit of a technical snafu earlier, so if you see somebody jump in the middle, I swear they're not trying to hijack the stream. With that, let's dive right in. I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves. We've got Alex Reynolds, Senior Manager and Regulatory Counsel from the Consumer Electronics Association. Alex, if you want to do a little bit about you and your background, that would be great.
Sure, thanks. I'm Senior Manager and Regulatory Counsel at CEA. I work on regulatory issues in front of the Federal Communications Commission, the Federal Trade Commission, also the Food and Drug Administration. It so happens that as these devices become more sophisticated, they end up looking more like medical devices too. So I have a very wide-ranging responsibility in my job here, working on regulatory issues. I look at policy every day. CEA thinks a lot about wearables and the Internet of Things and how those are going to become part of consumers' lives. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. I think that it's a conversation that we need to be very inclusive of everybody who's both using, manufacturing these devices and the whole sort of service industry around them. So I look forward to your questions.
Very cool. Thanks so much. Next up, we've got Brett Cohen, an associate at Hogan Lovells. I'm sure I'm bastardizing that. Lovells. But Brett has an extensive background as a technology lawyer. And Brett, if you want to take it away and give us a little bit about yourself, that'd be great.
Sure, and you got that right. So it's
solid.
50%, but you got it right. So I am an attorney at the Privacy and Information Management Group at Hogan Lovells, and I do work in technology law and a lot of the similar issues that were just discussed in terms of Internet of Things. What privacy notices do you give to your users and to users of your devices, and one of the interesting things about this space is it's a relatively unregulated area. So there are lots of things that you can do with user data, but very often what we advise on is what you should be doing, not only what you can be doing, because of the ethical considerations that we're going to be talking about today. And then also about privacy as a consumer, as a positive consumer activity, in sort of building recognition for your brand as a privacy-friendly organization. So thanks for inviting me here today, and these are really interesting and important issues as we move forward.
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate you guys having the time to join us as well. Let's dive right in, and I think we can start with an easy one for those of us who are online all the time. You know, one of the things that we at Overachiever Media deal with on a regular basis is, we work with clients who have any number of different social media presences, and whether that's helping them on the personal branding level, helping them on the business level, both can be challenges, and more importantly, both can be, sort of a dangerous minefield of what to share and what not. The world is constantly changing in terms of the platforms that are available to us, the kind of content and media that we can share. Let's start with sort of the basics. What, in your guys' mind, are good sort of guidelines these days for how to manage your online presence in a way that is, active and participating, but still careful to manage privacy and careful to. Well, let's just start with what are the good ways people can represent themselves online without crossing into any legal or or potentially defamatory issues. And feel free, either one of you guys, to jump in first.
Sure. So this is something that I've seen an evolution on in advising on this issue in the last 5 or 6 years. Starting back then, when most of I think social media started to become a real component of the marketing practices of the mainstream company at that point, and the guidance at that time that we were giving, or that came from the traditional advertising and marketing perspective, from a legal perspective, is run everything by your lawyers or some executive first, and make sure that everything's buttoned up and your I's are dotted, your T's are crossed, and you're not bringing liability onto the company. But quickly, that advice became outdated, and you can't operate effectively as a business now. Consumers demand interaction and instant gratification, and the companies that are really getting out to the forefront and being proactive and dealing with their customer base are really the ones who are building a great presence online. And so the question, how we typically advise now, is it really depends on the risk tolerance of the individual company. Some of the older companies in more conservative industries don't like to get out there, or companies in regulated industries. There are some issues, for example, with food and drug companies who are very highly regulated in what they can say about their products. But other than that, if the company really wants to build a strong presence, we absolutely encourage them to do that. But then we advise on the risks of doing so, and the risks are exactly what you would think of. It's you have rank and file employees in the marketing department who may be very good at what they do, going out and directly interacting with customers and saying things that can be ascribed to the company. And so this creates lots of issues, but they're not insurmountable issues, and it's something that you can deal with training and appropriate protections in place.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to pause the question just for a second because it looks like we got Jules finally. Excellent. Jules.
Hey, folks. Sorry, got me on my phone, but it's coming in all right.
All right, good. Jules, if you want, let's take a second and have you introduce yourself to the crowd.
Hey all, sorry to be behind. Jules Polonetsky. I'm the Executive Director of the Future of Privacy Forum. We're a DC think tank that focuses on responsible data practices. Our members are the chief privacy officers of probably about 100 or so companies, from a lot of the big tech companies to big brands, but also a lot of academics and privacy advocates. So we try to shape an ethical path forward.
Very cool. Well, thank you for joining us. Sorry about the momentary technical snafu. We were just talking about sort of the balance between, as the world becomes more social media centric, where's the line for businesses to sort of draw between building their presence online and opening themselves up to legal liability and issues. And we're just going to pass it off to Alex. Alex, you, as I would imagine, probably work with a lot of larger companies and brands the way that Brett was sort of talking about. What are their thoughts on sort of where the line of privacy and where the line of demarcation between what's worth sharing and what gets them into trouble?
Right. So it's a really difficult question, and I think I want to bring this up to a 50,000-foot level really quick to kind of make a point about social media versus other kinds of data, because I think people are the most familiar with their presence online, whether that's Facebook or Twitter, any social media presence. But what you don't think about necessarily is the data that is being collected about you, metadata about you, sort of the big data environment. And I think that if companies want to go forward and have the kind of engagement that they've built over the past couple of years through social media, both they and consumers are going to have to think about the shared responsibility for that additional data, your digital persona online. It's going to there aren't laws really to deal with that now. I think Brett was speaking to the kind of classic marketing presence online. Everyone can think of the traditional laws that deal with these areas, like defamation and that sort of thing. These are kind of legal remedies that have been around for a long time, but they're difficult to apply to the current data environment. So it's a question of knowing what data you have about people, informing consumers about that to the extent that it's reasonable, that you can, that it makes sense in terms of a cost-benefit analysis for your business, and being a good data steward. Having common sense about how you use that data, how you would feel, if that data were being collected about you, and acting accordingly. So we should expand the discussion beyond sort of a social media presence, I think, and especially for marketers who are increasingly using disparate databases and putting them together in ways that you wouldn't necessarily think about or intuit, in interacting with them on Facebook and through Twitter. It's not necessarily obvious that you've got data floating around about you and that people are making inferences about that. It's not a bad thing, and I think that's the conversation that we need to have as well, is where do you draw the line between dealing with these things as social issues, self-regulatory issues, and then having someone actually regulate it. I think we're in an inflection point with data where we haven't really, the questions are unsettled. So we have to create greater awareness about the totality of data that's out there, and then have a reasonable conversation about how it's supposed to be used, and where people are comfortable in terms of what data is out there about them and who can use it and those sorts of questions.
Sure. Well, that actually brings up an interesting point that I want to pivot to with our question to Jules. I remember a few years back there were a lot of questions about cookies and the related data that's being collected, when somebody visits a website. Jules, can you talk a little bit in your perspective about sort of the modern trend, the current trends in advertising and the way that advertisers are collecting data about us, whether knowingly or not, and the ways that that information is being shared amongst, not only marketers, but those that want sort of any sort of data to track customers? I mean, are we at a place right now where, we're putting too much onus on the individual to be responsible for themselves, or are we in a place where we need to start pushing back on larger organizations and saying, you need to be careful about how you're collecting data and what you're doing with it?
Well, I think there's both a good and a bad story here, right? And so it's clear that the current dominant models online, many of them are significantly funded by advertising. And I guess that's a good thing, because we know people don't seem to want to pay for much directly. On the other hand, we do see people paying for apps. And on the other hand, it's a small number of really big app developers that are primarily the ones earning enough revenue and content. And so, the business models will work themselves out. But the question is, where are users left in this model? I remember a couple of months ago trying to explain to somebody what the online data world looked like. And I started out years ago as the chief privacy officer at DoubleClick. In the old days, you went to a website, there was a cookie, the ads tracked you, and here's what you could do to opt out. And it's become a pretty complicated environment today. If I actually had to explain how third-party data appending works, how you're anonymous, but yet somebody can link information about what you've purchased 6 months later and tailor both content and ads, it's become way too complicated. Most of the industry doesn't understand. They know their particular niche. They know their sort of segment of the publishing or of apps. But there are, frankly, a limited number of people who could describe to you, the full range of the data ecosystem, let alone a consumer. But I think we're starting to see tools that are getting more effective. Everyone now ought to know that if they see an ad with a little triangle eye, that ad's been tracking you or is going to be tailored for you based on where you've been and where you've gone. You've got the industry opt-outs. Very few people use them, but they're there, and you
Wait, I
can
have a
take
question.
advantage of that.
Is that why I see so many My Little Pony ads? I'm asking for a friend. Totally unrelated.
Well, here's what companies need to do, and here's sort of my solution. My solution isn't giving everybody more privacy and less data. Why are you getting Little Pony ads? Now, I don't know. Maybe you really are into Little Pony, but I suspect it is because you've got a child, or you did some research, or you gave a gift. Look how well Amazon or Netflix do at tailoring content and commerce for me. Mm-hmm. And we laugh when they're getting us wrong, right? Why are they showing me a Little Pony video? Don't they know that this isn't my profile, or that's just an item that I bought for my friend? We want them to get us right. We want them to know us better. Now, what can we do to encourage the rest of the ecosystem, who similarly is looking to tailor their stores, their physical space, their websites for you? How do we, with apologies to Sheryl Sandberg, how do we encourage companies to lean into data use so that I'm more aware, more in control, and yes, you'll sell me more, and you'll track me more, and you'll know me more intimately, but it'll be a better experience. I'll close with this point. Look at how people got upset when they learned that Target was, sending them coupons based on figuring out a pregnancy score. Hey, that was sensitive. They shouldn't have done that, right? Look at how upset people got when they learned that Orbitz was giving a better set of vacation options to people who were using Macs, because it turns out Mac users take better vacations and are a little wealthier and better than the rest of us. And so when those issues were discovered, there was big consumer backlash. But the other day, I bought 50 Shades of Grey on Amazon just for research purposes. I mean, how does this e-publishing thing become such a global phenomenon? I wanted to understand. And now I'm getting ads of every other softcore porn novel out there, and I'm not freaked out, and nobody's freaked out that Amazon will do that, because they've made it very clear. And you know what? I didn't have to read their privacy policy. Do you know how I found out? It says, here's what we think you might like based on what you've done, based on all the other stuff we track. So how do we get the rest of us, because guess what? Everyone is doing this. How do we get the rest of the environment to say, hey, Little Pony, here's why we know you like Little Ponies?
I think that the keys are transparency and creating value propositions for your customers. So transparency is exactly what Jules said. You're going to react more favorably to the companies who put it out there and say, this is what we're doing, and giving users a meaningful option to opt out, not burying it in a 75 screen iTunes click through. But actually putting it out there and saying, look, this is what we're doing with your information. Let us know if you don't want us to be doing this. The other thing is creating value propositions, and there's a lot of surveys and studies being done now to figure out exactly what consumers are willing to provide their data for what benefits they're willing to provide their data. And there are various dollar amounts that are put on it, but I think one of Jules's points really rings true, which is, if you're walking by a store that you've been to or that you've reviewed on Yelp or something, and all of a sudden you get a coupon for 20% off as you walk by, that might be something that, hey, that's really useful to me, and you sort of realize, you'd have to realize that it's happening and how they're using your information, but it has some sort of tangible value proposition for the consumer. And I'll contrast that to the, some of the other types of tracking that are not transparent, that are used to benefit the consumer indirectly in that they get free content for it, but because their expectation is free content and free services, it comes as a real, as Jules demonstrated in his example, as a real surprise. And that's when you start to get into some of the PR difficulties, the lawsuits, and other consumer complaints about your business. So those are important things to keep in mind.
Yeah, jumping on that real quick, I mean, creepy is a problem, right? You don't want to be creepy in the way that you address consumers. In other words, you want to match their expectations with the reality of what you're providing them, or the service that you're providing them. When those expectations don't match with that reality, you get that creepiness factor that causes people to pull away from the product and the service, and that's one of those social things that I was talking about that we have to overcome. Over time, people will adjust to what they think and expect from marketers, because now a lot, you kind of expect what's going to happen on Facebook and social media. Maybe we're a little uncomfortable with the way that ads are being served to us through those platforms, but they do provide some level of value, so we want to go forward. But there are much more sophisticated ways of doing that now, and the question is, how do you engage with consumers to let them know in a concise but detailed, clear way that these things are happening, and that, like Brett said, is the value proposition. What to them is the cost-benefit analysis. And we need to do a lot more research on where consumers are in that space, because you probably heard of the privacy paradox, right? You want all the privacy, but you don't want to really trade, or you want all the services, but you don't really want to trade anything for that. The digital space has kind of trained consumers over time, I think, to kind of expect, for lack of a better way to put it, something for nothing because of the way that advertising has supported this space. But the times are changing. So
yeah, absolutely.
And don't be creepy is often said, but it's, and everyone sort of assumes like, hey, that's just good general advice, and it is, but it's actually hard. All of us who work in a certain space, our expectations start to shift. We're not normal people anymore, right? We're not average users. And if we sit, in Silicon Valley, we may not even ever see an average, user or human being. We think like the world is West Coast and East Coast and so forth. So it's really hard, and you see companies making mistakes, and you're like, hey, how could they have done that? But it's not always intuitive, right? There was a lot of criticism, wasn't there, of Facebook's experiment to test what the impact of depressing comments were. Were they going to make people more depressed? And everybody said, oh my God, how can you experiment on humans like that? But an interesting academic did a study, and he asked people who hadn't heard of this. He gave them a couple of examples, and some of the examples were approved by academic, institutional review boards. And he gave them the Facebook example, and then he gave them other examples, which were, considered very respectable. So, some things that you might think were completely normal. A university did a test to learn how people respond to phishing emails. So they sent fake phishing emails to learn, will people click? Now, they obviously didn't ask anyone to opt in. Hey, guess what? We're going to try to trick you. They did this without consent, and the IRB said, hey, that's fine. That's, is a good experiment. We want to learn how to protect people from bad phishing emails. When average users were asked and were explained what Facebook did, and then were told about this sort of phishing thing, they were offended by the phishing thing. Like, what, you're trying to trick me? See how smart I am? They thought that that was offensive. When they were told that Facebook wanted to figure out what's the right number of posts and do they have any impact, they're like, oh, okay, seems fine. And so even that was really creepy. But that's not even what the average users thought. It's hard.
Well, I think one of the things you're certainly pointing out that is important is to remember that, in all of this, context and phrasing matters, right? It's certainly valuable to remember that as we're looking at these different issues, framing them the right question and not just sort of, taking a baseball bat to the issue and hitting it, sometimes some delicacy and sometimes some directed approach is needed, and I think it's a valuable thing to keep in mind. I'm going to take a pause for a second and just remind everybody, if you have questions or comments, hashtag DDEthics. We've got some great questions coming in from participants. I want to jump into a couple of those. So one of the great questions we got from folks earlier, there's a lot of danger associated with being sort of a person online. When I was growing up, this is going to certainly age me at a very specific point. I was 13 when we got our first, internet-enabled computer in the house. It was dial-up. There was not a lot of danger sort of really associated with it because there wasn't a lot you could do unless you were foolish enough to actually intentionally give somebody really private information. Nowadays, with the proliferation of Facebook, Twitter, lots of different social media that make it incredibly easy and simple to share, and now the social norms that go with that, the sharing of Facebook pictures, from the party last night, or, you're messing with somebody and you're pretending to be somebody else, you get into the whole issue of catfishing. One of the real dangers that we're seeing right now is that taboo subjects are much more at the forefront of conversation than they used to be. Issues related to, I'm applying for a job, but I just discovered that there are, pictures of me drunk at a party from 3 years ago that I didn't know were online or available. Or, I wrote this thing that was, at the time I was really angry about X, and now that I'm older, I've had different opinions about it, but maybe some of the language I used was really inflammatory and not even well supported. Issues of things I did in the past are now very clearly available online. And Brett, I'd like to start with you and your thoughts from a legal perspective of, where do we draw a line now in terms of what's freely available that other people put out or we put out in the past, and now, an employer's looking at it, or somebody that wants to give us work. Where's the legal line in terms of what can and can't be used against us, and how do we protect ourselves in those situations?
And that's a great question, particularly when you have a new generation entering the workforce who has grown up with sharing everything that they do with the world, and then you have the decision makers who came up in a different generation and are not the digital natives that grew up in that sort of atmosphere. From a legal perspective, there actually are rules. Or there are rules that would apply that would prevent consideration of certain factors about you. So, and that can be a stumbling block for certain types of companies, particularly in the employment context. So, if you're an employer and you check out somebody's Facebook post that you're considering to hire, and they write about being depressed, and you say, I don't know if I want this sort of person on my team. Well, that could be a discrimination and on the basis of a health condition. And so there are other sorts of laws out there that sort of some employers aren't attuned to. Right, your first reaction when you get a new candidate is to Google them. And there are ways to insulate yourselves from that, but that's from a liability perspective. The other thing that I'm seeing, at least, is that now that everybody's online, the norms are slowly changing in terms of what employers are expecting of their employees, and they have to, because if you're going to exclude everybody who's posted something that could be considered questionable online, you're going to be excluding a large percentage of the potential workforce. So I see employers who are adapting to it, but it really depends a lot on who's doing the hiring and what the culture of the organization is. And there are stumbling blocks from a legal perspective, but there have been a lot of studies done on this, and your online presence is being reviewed by the people who you're doing business with, who you're looking for employment with. And it's something that really should go into consideration when you're deciding what you post online, and then from the other side of the coin, what you're allowed to consider when you're considering doing business or hiring these types of people.
Cool. Alex, Jules, you guys have any thoughts?
I mean, it's interesting to me because you have this whole industry of reputation management, right?
Yeah.
It's about understanding how you market yourself. You are your own PR person. You manage your own digital identity. It's another thing like taxes or something. It just sort of goes along with life now. It's something that we are better understanding but still have to internalize, and I think that's what Brett was getting to in his comments about the evolution of employers and how different industries are going to look at what you do and the information that you put out there. Their interpretation is going to, depend on how flexible they are, how permissive they are, and that will continue to be a sticking point for a long time until people really learn how to use Facebook, Twitter, etc., or social media in general, to their advantage. That's the key point, is that we need to have some sort of education around, okay, you can interact with with people in real space in a certain way, and you may have to adjust those expectations online in another way.
Sure. Jules, I want to take it to you for a second, and I want to pivot the conversation a little bit in terms of exploitation of this content online. You know, one of the questions that we've gotten in was talking about the Jennifer Lawrence, you know, the recent celebrity hacking of photos, and specifically Jennifer Lawrence's response in recent issue of Vanity Fair about how she called the context of the way that the crime was committed, the way that this has been done a sex crime. You know, can you talk a little bit about your thoughts in terms of this sort of, you know, I mean, at least from a sort of communal or from a personal perspective, you know, this feels like uncharted territory for a lot of people, and whether it's, you know, a legal issue, and we'll certainly come to Brett for that. But from your perspective, I mean, you know, this is sort of a new age in how we think about theft and you know, intellectual property. You know, what are your thoughts on is this? I mean, could we call this a sex crime? Let's start with that. And I think we just lost Jules. Okay. I'm sure they'll join us. Obviously,
that's where the line is.
I drew a line, and he did not want to cross that. No. Right, let's come back to you then for a second and talk about it from a legal perspective. You know, obviously this is a crime. Could we call it a sex crime? Is there a legal framework to put that in?
So there is a legal framework, and what it is there's a broad immunity for websites that host third-party content. Well, first off, the hacking can be a crime in and of itself.
Sure,
right?
Of course. Yeah.
But a lot of the focus has been on some of the websites like Reddit and 4chan that were where people were publishing these. And there's a law that grants broad immunity to user-generated content websites for the materials that are posted by others. And so this is something that's really helped develop the internet and user-generated content as we know it. So, you know, YouTube couldn't exist if YouTube were liable for every defamatory post that somebody posted to it. And so for a long time, a lot of user-generated content sites have sort of said, look, we're immune from this. We really don't want to step in and be the arbitrator of what people are posting. We don't want to be a censor. But I think some of the recent incidents like this, which have really shocked people, have caused companies like that to take a real look about what they should be taking down, how they should be changing their policies. They're allowed to voluntarily take things down and also not be subject to liability. Sure. And so there's been a more robust debate in the last few years about what are the responsibilities of some of the more prominent social networking sites and user-generated content sites to being more socially conscious and removing hate speech, removing nude photos that are posted when they have no legal obligation to do so. And I think that's a real debate that's going to continue in the next few years as more stuff gets leaked and more of these user-generated content sites start to realize that having this type of stuff being posted on their servers is going to raise issues with the general public and cause negative publicity.
Sure. Jules, I want to bring it back to you. I'm not sure if you caught the question before the connection died, but we were talking about Jennifer Lawrence and the recent hacking of celebrity photos and the nature of that.
Yeah.
So my question, and we've lost him again. Okay. We're going to work on that. Alex, let's bring it back to you. I mean, from a business perspective, from organizations that are trying to sort of indemnify themselves against potentially, as Brett was talking about, the YouTubes of the world, the Instagrams of the world, where they're providing a platform. Where is their responsibility in an issue like this? Where should they? And we've got Jules back. Okay, Jules, we're gonna drop it real quick. I swear, if you break off again, I will dial you in via phone right here. We're gonna make sure you can answer this question. But Alex, real quick, business responsibility from your perspective. Where's the line to be drawn?
Well, businesses really do try to take this into consideration now. I think the media coverage of things like the iCloud hack for the Jennifer Lawrence photos, other people's photos, has brought home these issues in a way that they had not been before. And in my interactions with CEA's members, I see a lot of recognition, both on the large company side and on the small and medium business side, that there are they have a responsibility for security and privacy in their products and their services. So there's a general corporate sense that we need to move forward and provide better privacy and security protections, continue to improve those protections, and the only thing that we're looking at, that I look at from a policy perspective, is, again, making that cost-benefit analysis and figuring out how we can apply current law appropriately in a reasonable way that allows sort of these innovations in cloud computing, and data transfer, in big data, just the privacy of your information generally, drawing and innovation and regulation.
Sure.
Is there a point where something has to be regulated? I'm not sure we're at the stage where we could say yes to that yet, because we don't. The questions are so unsettled, and the business environment is in such flux that it wouldn't really make sense to do that now.
Sure. All right, Jules, we're going to pass it off to you again. Hopefully the connection will keep. Go for it.
Thanks. Well, so look, I think the challenge is this. I think we're increasingly seeing companies throwing resources at figuring out how do you not get hacked, and it's never going to be perfect, but I think people got the message. The weak link here is always that I have to get into my account, and the more security you provide, the more I get locked out of my account, the more I call in, the more your rep has to give me a password. We're at this inflection point now where I think users understand that I got some very sensitive stuff online. It might be my naked pictures, it might be my emails. Years ago at AOL, we had lots of problems with people looking to break into AOL accounts and steal the accounts, or break into celebrity accounts, and we gave people these little security tokens. And some of the celebrities used them, but most people didn't want to bother. They wanted to just get online, and they didn't want to take the time to have a little fob in their pocket, and if they didn't have it, they couldn't get online. Well, I think today the time is right. People get that their iCloud information is critically important, and if they're going to accidentally give up their email. So Google yesterday, or 2 days ago, launched this YubiKey, this little USB key, and if you hook it to your account, then users can't get into your account, right? Lots of people, as a result of the iCloud episode, have turned on, or at least now know what two-factor authentication is. We've got to make it really easy for the average user who wants it to be easy but wants it to be secure. Until we solve that usability of security problem, the security people know how to lock down things. It's just nobody can get in once they lock it down. We need to solve that consumer usability. And I don't know that a law can say, do it well enough that consumers can get in, but hackers not. That's going to be UI and consumer testing. And so I like seeing these new keys. I like seeing the two-factor authentication. I love the fact that I can lock down my iPhone and my iPad with my finger. That's with me. Some privacy advocates said, oh my God, it's your fingerprint. And I'm like, the alternative is your phone's not locked. The alternative is your phone is locked with some very easy passcode, and everyone else gets into it. So are we better off with that finger scan that's going to keep the bad guy from getting into my data? So I think we're getting there, but that's what I'd like to see. Give me more finger scans. Give me more YubiKeys. Let's figure out how to deal with the weak link, the actual user, because that's where most of these breaches are happening.
Personally, I just print a picture of a safe, the front of it, and I just tape it to my keyboard. That seems to keep me pretty safe in that regard. No, not as many laughs on that joke as I thought. That's sure. All right, so again, hashtag DDEthics. We got some great questions coming in. We really appreciate you guys have given us some phenomenal things to think about so far. One question that's come in that I want to touch on. So there's a new social media network called ELLO, E-L-L-O, that's trying to establish itself as a network where users themselves are not the product, which I think we could probably spend an entire conversation on. The way that Facebook has advertised towards us, it seems as though not only are we the product, but we're the product that we're being sold to products, and products. Oh, I can't speak today. Let's try that again. We are the products, and products are being sold to us. There we go. So if Elo is trying to remove itself from this economy, what are the arguments for and against the ways that Facebook uses its information? Is there some positive benefit that we can point to say, look, as we've talked about, these things are free, and we need to support them financially in order to do so, but maybe there's some added benefit there that we're not talking about.
Well, to comment on Elo, and please be my friend there, because I don't have any friends there, which is the case on Elo, as well as other private. There are a number of other private social networks. I think I've got 3 or 4 friends.
We can be your friends.
The challenge with these private social networks is, and this one, look, it's getting a lot of buzz because evidently all the people on it are cooler than me, and they're all designers, and so it's getting a lot of buzz. But there are a number of other less celebrated private social networks, and they don't end up spreading very virally because they are private, and you've got to invite everybody. Part of what made Facebook succeed, part of what makes these networks succeed, is they encourage you to share, right? They make it easy, and they encourage you to share, and that's sort of been their success. So, I welcome their entry, but I think we need to deal with the reality, which is that most of us are interested in being on LinkedIn because that's where a lot of our professional folks are, and we're interested in being, on Facebook because that's where our folks are, and that's where people are sharing information. And you can lock down your settings. I mean, I think it's funny that some of these people running to Elo, they were posting publicly, or they're posting on Twitter. I mean, you want to lock down your Facebook network, you can lock it down. The fact that it's ad supported, I wonder what would happen if Facebook said, you know what, we'll take off the ads, but you'll pay us $20 a year. How many people do you imagine would take that offer? None. I've sometimes said to Facebook, you ought to do that because.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. All right. If it was $20 a year, we can have that conversation. I'm already paying subscriptions for any number of other any other services. Why not say to somebody, we'll take the advertising out entirely, and you just pay us a flat rate every year or even every month?
It turns out that consumers don't. I mean, you can take a look at the apps that are free versus the ad-supported. The number of business models that have been able to manage on, hey, pay us $3 more to get the ad-free version, very limited, unless the ads are very intrusive and really annoying, in which case, you try to get rid of them just to use the service. As long as Facebook keeps those ads from like popping up and blocking, my page, I think our goal should be making sure that they make it easy for people to opt out of the targeting, which you can do. I always ask companies, I said, you have an opt-out. How many people are using it? And it turns out that we complain, but how many people, right now you can go to Facebook, any of the ads that have that little triangle eye, you can go to a big setting and you can turn it off. But most of us don't take the time.
That's what I was talking about earlier with sort of the cultural shift in managing your online identity. There are lots of ways that Jules just pointed out where you can manage and secure what you're doing online. The problem is that there's a threshold level of effort that you have to make to do that across so many different services that you have that you can engage with, that it becomes a job in and of itself to manage those sorts of identity, which is why it's nice now that we are seeing a lot more adoption, a lot more thought about things like biometrics, which give you the capability to have a single login and to do that securely in a way that other people can't get access. Once people understand that they need to deal with a digital identity, that there's a shared responsibility between you and the service provider for managing the security and the privacy of that data, the provider giving you enough information to make that a reality, and you understanding the way that you can lock down profiles, do opt-outs, and that sort of thing, then with that shared understanding, we'll have progress in terms of the security and privacy of data. Until then, we might be ships passing in the night. We might be talking past one another, which is a real problem.
Just to piggyback on Jules's point, this is the fundamental difficult question for startups who want to enter this space. Is that because consumers don't want to pay for it, you're not going to create a service by by creating a paid service, right? And so you're going to need to fund yourselves somehow. And so the prevailing model that's going on, and in particular with a lot of the venture capital in this space, is build up the user base first, and then figure out how to monetize. And when the user base gets used to free everything, you're not going to monetize by having them pay something at a later date. And so frequently the way to do that is through advertising or selling services to the user base. I think, and this isn't something that's an issue that's confined to startups. You've seen the trouble that, with all due respect to that, we're on a Google Hangout. Google Plus has had a hard time competing with Facebook, just because everybody is invested in Facebook, and much more sharing is going on, like Jules said, is going on Facebook. It's going to take a sort of a shift in consumer attitudes towards privacy-friendly services, and there's one sort of prominent example, which is that in its latest version of its operating system, Apple created the option for users to use the DuckDuckGo search engine, which their value proposition is: we don't save your searches, or we don't track you using your searches, and we anonymize it as compared to some of the other search engines, which is their value proposition, but it makes it more difficult to monetize. But because of the recognition that there are users who want to use these types of services, if they can partner with some of the larger players in the field and can create value propositions for consumers based on the privacy offerings, that's an area for growth in these sort of privacy-enhancing services moving forward.
Sure. So, to piggyback on some of this, actually, because I think we've touched on this in a lot of different angles. One of the questions that we had that came through was that, removing of content is important. Being able to, as a third part, as a platform, being able to say, illegal or for whatever reason, content of issue, can be removed. Social networks, it's not the same thing. People are representing themselves. If on Facebook there's sensitive material that's up, it's a lot harder than, say, even on YouTube, which has media relationships and whatnot. It's a lot harder to get content removed when if Brett posts a picture of me that I'm not happy about, it's a lot harder to get him to remove it. So I guess my question is, what are the responsibilities of social networks, to remove sensitive content? I mean, there's obviously an issue. There's the legal side, which is if there are illegal activity. I mean, that's one thing. But if I don't like that a picture of me drunk from 2007 showed up, where's the line drawn there? How do we advise people to respond to issues like that?
It's a tough question, and it's a tough question for businesses and social networks, because they get inundated with, assuming that you become successful, you get inundated with requests to take down content and that it violates your rules. And so I've sat in on discussions with some of the major tech companies on this, just sort of in the context of taking down hate speech or other harmful content. And one, there's the issue of volume, but even if you're willing to deal with that issue, there's the issue of, do we want to be viewed as the censor? Remember, these sites were built on sharing. And so if you're viewed as removing certain viewpoints, or one person's it's the one person's revolutionary is the other person's terrorist, right? They get lots of competing requests where it's hard to draw lines, and a lot of these companies were built on free speech. You saw Google pulled out China when China was hacking into Google servers, and they're not willing to compromise on some of these ideals. At the same time, you want to build a site that's friendly to users, that users aren't going to feel like they're getting squeezed out, or they're getting marginalized, or the company isn't responding to offensive content.
Yeah.
So it's a tough question for some of, particularly the larger players in the field, and they are trying to address it responsibly. But it's a question of resources, and it's a question of wanting to be viewed as censors. And one other point on that is a lot of these companies operate in multiple countries, and so they get, which was conveyed to me during these discussions, is that they get requests from governments or from people in power to take down content that's critical of them, right? And as you know, as U.S.-based companies who are very strongly pro-speech, and you know, Twitter takes a very strong stance about not wanting to take down content, wanting to be the marketplace of ideas, and then you get caught in the crossfire between that and possibly getting your site taken down or getting caught in prosecutions in other countries. So there's all sorts of competing interests here, and you know, not just, you know, and I think I think that most of these major companies want to be socially conscious, but there are a lot of different factors at play that are muddying the waters.
And one other thing to bring up about that, I think one case has brought this into stark relief, which is the Google versus Spain case, the right to be forgotten, this concept that you should be able to claw back data that you have or someone else has put online and that has become searchable, become indexed, or something like that. Google thus far, I understand, has received hundreds of thousands of requests for content to be taken down. Are those legitimate requests? You know, is that information that people should be aware of? Did that news article from 10 years ago detailing someone's crimes that they were later absolved of, or perhaps they were guilty of, be taken down and not available for search? Does that go across borders? So, you know, does currently Google's obligation is only to take things down on its search engine where European citizens have access to it, but not in the United States. And then is Google the censor? Is Google empowered to make these sorts of decisions about what information we have access to? And those questions are similar to ones in social media and managing your digital profile, but I think that as people put more and more information online, that question will be something that we'll be grappling with very quickly.
Yeah, well, I think that there's a lot to unpack there, and I think most importantly that these are questions that are going to continue to evolve over time. I think, you know, privacy in general, it strikes me in this particular context is a lot more complicated, and more importantly, you know, a lot more delicate, I think, than it has been in the past. There's always been a line of demarcation between, you know, these are the things I want out in the world, these are the things I don't. And particularly when we're talking about instances of, you know, as you mentioned in your example, the article from 10 years ago about a crime that somebody may have allegedly committed and were, you know, disproven. I mean, you know, what comes back to haunt us is a challenge that I think we're going to be facing, and certainly in the next 10 years, maybe the next 20 to 30 even as well. With the last few minutes we have left, I just want to make sure that we get a chance. Again, unfortunately, I think Jules' connection finally decided it was done with us, so we've lost him. But you know, I want to make sure that we get a chance to throw back to you guys and make sure that you know, if you have anything coming up or any online presences you want to let people know about, that we give you a chance to announce that to our crowd here. So, Alex, anywhere in particular you want to send people to find you, or anything coming up related to CEA you want to let people know about?
Well, I think the biggest thing, and what people probably know about, is the Consumer Electronics Show, January 5 to 9, 2015.
I'm sure my free tickets are in the mail.
The Privacy Marketplace was announced yesterday, so we'll have social media presence on that. Friend us on Facebook and Twitter, apropos to this conversation.
Awesome. Brett, how about yourself?
Sure. So, no other web presentations coming up soon. But please, if you're interested in these legal issues, go and check out our blog at www.hldataprotection.com, and you'll see like some of these complex issues, including the European issues that Alex was mentioning, and it really is an exciting field. Privacy is getting big in a whole number of spaces. I'm actually going to be speaking at South by Southwest EDU in the spring on education and privacy issues, and so I think a lot of responsible tech companies who are whatever field they're entering are looking at these questions, and I encourage all of the listeners to take a serious look at privacy as you develop your business models and your marketing strategies.
Very cool. Appreciate it. Jules, unfortunately, it sounds like he's unable to join us, so I'll just quick throw out at Jules Polonetsky. You can find him on Twitter. You can also find him about.me/Jules Polonetsky, and of course, he is the executive director of the Future of Privacy Forum, so I'm sure you guys can find him there as well. I want to thank you guys for your time, and Jules as well. Again, my name is Jason Ellis, Overachiever Media here in the district. We have a website, we have a newsletter, we got online, we got it all. You need it, we got it. Appreciate the time always. Look forward to chatting with you guys on the next talk. And with that, I'll throw it back to Kelly to bring us home.
Yeah, just Brett, Alex, thank you guys so much for your time. This was a great discussion. To all the viewers out there, if you want to follow up with us, continue the conversation on Twitter, keep using the hashtag DDEthics. You can also use that hashtag to let us know about any other topics that you might want us to do a little web panel for. So let us know. But thank you for speaking with us today, guys, and thank you everyone for tuning in. Until next time.
Terrific. Thanks, guys. Take care. Oh, and the recording and recap will be out in about 48 hours, so keep an eye out for that.
There you go.
All right. Take care, guys.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.